Welcome back. Chapter 18. I didn't remember getting back to my car, felt drunk or high or suspended outside my body. I wasn't particularly surprised to find myself driving the back roads instead of heading toward town. The relief I'd always anticipated feeling in this moment, the solace of unburdening, hadn't arrived. Fear and guilt still wound a tight fist inside my stomach. As it turned out, Dean knowing didn't make the thought of everyone else knowing, too, any easier to bear. I let my eyes drift closed for a second, breathed in the scent of autumn through my open window, both musty and crisp. Felt the breeze float over my face. I opened my eyes, saw the late afternoon sun shining golden, landing with an amber twinkle against the grass. What was it about autumn light that made the passage of time so apparent? That made a hot lump of unshed tears form in my throat. No other season made me think of weeks passing, years gone, time wasted the way autumn did. The light itself, a whispered reminder that there are finite numbers of days left for all of us. I tried to conjure up the sound of Eliza's laugh and found I no longer could. Had trouble even with the tone of her voice. Had it been higher than mine? Deeper? My answer depended on the day. I felt guilty that I didn't miss her more. That the destruction of our family in the wake of her absence and the unintentional part I somehow played in her death were more painful than her actual loss. What kind of sister did that make me? What kind of person? I could no longer find the point where my guilt ended and my sorrow began. Tears rolled down the side of my face and gathered in the hollows of my neck. I drove until after darkness fell, trying to work up the courage to go home and confess everything to my parents. But when my almost empty gas tank forced me back to Ludlow, I found myself at the diner instead, pushing pieces of reheated meatloaf and mashed potatoes around my plate without eating any of it. I'd clearly been full of shit when I told Dean I was ready to stop hiding things because I didn't seem to be in much of a hurry to tell the truth. It was long past regular Ludlow dinner hours, and I was the only customer in the diner. All of Main Street empty and quiet. Across from me, Mabel busied herself wiping down the counter, probably hoping I'd hurry up and finish so she could lock up and go home. "What happened there?" I asked, pointing with my fork to a couple of broken chairs stacked to the right of the door. My voice sounded dull and lifeless, asking a question with no real interest in the answer. Mabel clucked her tongue, coming around from behind the counter to top off my cup of decaf. Garrett Bloom and his friends were here earlier causing a ruckus. Drunk as skunks, all of them, and in a foul mood, too. My hand stilled on its way to reaching for the mug, eyes darting around the diner like Garrett might be hiding in a corner or underneath a table, waiting to jump out and teach me a lesson about squealing. I'm guessing Sheriff Baker would have something to say about one of his deputies tearing up this place. Mabel cocked her head. "He's not a deputy anymore. Haven't you heard? Got fired over some mess with Amber Stevens." In the moment when I told Baker about Garrett, I hadn't cared what came afterward. And the fact was, Garrett deserved to be fired. But I couldn't help the way my stomach turned over, the little frisson of fear that laced up my spine. Garrett wasn't the kind of guy to look at his own actions and take stock of what he'd done wrong. He would always find a way to place the full weight of blame on someone else. I wouldn't want to be Amber right now, and things probably weren't looking too good for me either. "Do you know what happened?" I asked. From what I heard, Sheriff Baker suspected something wasn't kosher for a while, but it was only a suspicion until a few days ago. Somebody ratted Garrett out, and he was too caught off guard to even deny it, losing his job over Amber Stevens. Mabel shook her head, started clearing away my still full plate. Sometimes that boy's dumber than dirt. I left a $20 bill on the table while Mabel was in the kitchen and slipped out the back door into the alley. My car was parked in a tiny lot beside the grocery store, and my footsteps sounded loud in the stillness of the night, as if I was announcing my presence to the entire town, even though there was no one around to hear me. I had my keys in my hand, resisting the sudden urge to look over my shoulder when I came to a stop. Someone had scratched the word cunt across the driver's side of my car, the letters huge and jagged, paint scraped away in a violent gauze. I started forward again, moving faster when a dark shape lunged around the back of my car, slamming my hip against the door and grabbing my wrist before I can get my keys out. "You fucking bitch," Garrett said, breath hot and rank with whiskey fumes. "I ought to kill you." I pushed back hard, but he didn't move. His whole body pressed against mine. "Get off of me," I said, chest heaving. I tried to use the car as leverage, shoved him away, but it was like trying to shift a brick wall. My back screamed where it was pinned against the sharp edge of my car window. "I was always good to you," Garrett said from between clenched teeth. "And this how you treat me?" He was crying, I realized, the knowledge shocking me into momentary stillness. Tears and snot mingled on his face, his cheeks ruddy and eyes bloodshot. "Garrett," I said, Suddenly, his weight lifted off of me, his body spinning away. Behind him, Eric had a hold of his shoulders, pulling him backwards. "Come on, man," Eric said. "That's enough. She's not worth it." We both watched as Garrett stumbled toward the street, still mumbling under his breath, and then Eric took a step in my direction. I shrank back, but he didn't touch me. His upper lip curled like he smelled something rotten. "You need to learn to mind your own fucking business, Greg. Go back to Chicago. You don't belong here anymore." He held a beer bottle in his hand, and he raised it as he walked away. For a second, I thought he meant to throw it at my head, and my arms came up automatically, but it smashed into the ground at my feet instead. A sharp explosion of glass, beer foaming around my shoes. It was a long time before my hands were steady enough to drive. In that moment, there was no one I could call, I realized. Not a single person who wanted to hear from me. No one I hadn't disappointed. Not Cassie or Ryan. Not my parents, and not even Dean. The loneliness felt like death, heavy and suffocating. I could barely find enough air to breathe. I had finally burned every last one of the bridges, and I was choking on the flames. I went home and fell into bed, suffered, bloated, sticky dreams. Roy morphing into Dean and back again. Eliza trying to speak around a mouth crammed full of rotten autumn leaves. Amber chasing me through a wheat field, the stalks sharp as razors when they flicked against my skin. Cassie and Ryan howling with laughter as they watched me run. Even after 12 hours of sleep, I woke up fuzzy and exhausted. I lay there for a while, listening to the silence of a half-dead house. My face felt swollen from crying, my vision blurred through puffy eyelids. Eventually, I dragged myself off the bed and shuffled into Eliza's room, a spot I'd avoided since the day of my return. I was hit all over again with this bland emptiness. Had my mother boxed up all Eliza's things, her dog-eared books, tangles of jewelry, an oversized sweater, and donated them to Goodwill in Nishio? Or worse, loaded them into garbage bags and put them out for the trash? I couldn't imagine it. My mother might not have wanted reminders every day, but I didn't think she had the stomach to rid herself of Eliza's possessions entirely. The attic access in our house was in Eliza's closet through a panel in the ceiling that, when pulled down, released a rickety ladder. We usually only went up there twice a year to drag down the boxes of Christmas ornaments stored under the elves, and then, after New Year's, to put them back again. But it was my mother's favorite storage spot for things she couldn't bring herself to part with, but didn't want cluttering up the house either. The set of dishes she'd inherited from her own mother, but deemed too ugly to use, an old dressmaker mannequin that had been pressed into duty for a single summer when she had the idea she might start making some of our clothes, my dad's long forgotten coffee mug collection. If Eliza things were still here, if she kept the photo Faith had seen, the attic was where they'd be. The latter was even more precarious than I remembered, missing a rung near the middle and squeaking ominously under my weight. Although it was autumn outside, the mornings sharp with oncoming winter, the attic was stuffy and closed, as if all the summer heat had permeated the wood and couldn't find a way out again. Everything was as I remembered it, except for a collection of boxes and plastic totes stacked against the far wall near a tiny gable window. I scrambled up the final step and stood on a narrow walkway of planks my dad had laid down the center of the attic to prevent anyone from falling through the installation and breaking their neck. As I suspected, the new boxes were neatly labeled with Eliza's name and a short description of their contents. I bypassed the ones labeled clothes and bedding and homed in on the two marked personal belongings. I managed to make myself comfortable on the makeshift floor and opened the lid of the first box. The smell of dust and roses hit me in the face, the source of the smell apparent when I saw the desiccated remains of Eliza's junior prom corsage laid carefully on the top. I remember the night Travis had slid it onto her wrist. White roses I deemed boring, but Eliza had been thrilled to receive. She kept it on the top of her dresser, slowly withering away until the day she died. I plucked the corsage gingerly from the pile and set it aside. Underneath were stacks of novels, her scrapbooks, a diary I already secretly read, although there wasn't much to glean from its pages. Eliza had been an indifferent of her own life. When I first picked the flimsy lock at 14, I'd been hoping for something juicy, or at least some venom aimed at me I could throw back in her face the next time we fought, but had instead been greeted with semi-annual entries documenting what we'd eaten for Christmas dinner or her latest grade in English. It had hardly been worth the effort to snoop. The rest of the box contained a shoebox filled with makeup and jewelry and a random assortment of nail polishes. I lifted out the lipstick Eliza always wore, a pale pink, almost the same color as her lips, and smoothed it over the back of my hand. Rubbed it in until only a faint shimmer remained. Eliza had done my makeup one night when we were in junior high, the two of us giggling as she tried to give me cat eyes with black liquid eyeliner from our mom's bathroom drawer. The results had been lopsided at best. The memory made me ache. I put the lipstick back in the box. I hoped the rest of her personal items would prove more fruitful, although I had no idea what I was really looking for. Something that eliminated my sister for me, maybe. Made her a living, breathing person again, at least for a few minutes. The second box held her yearbooks, the remains of her garbage wall, each quote carefully removed from the bulletin board and saved, the cards she'd gotten from Travis or our parents over the years, and a couple of truly cringe-worthy poems she'd written at some point. I pictured us sitting here together, laughing at her attempts to rhyme adore with before, and turned it into something profound. Another thing her death had robbed us of, the chance to tease each other, to look back on our teenage years together with a kind of fond disbelief at what idiots we've been. At the bottom of the box was a romance novel, something with a bare-chested guy on the cover clutching a woman who could have been either in the throes of an orgasm or suffering a leg cramp. Bosom heaved beneath a low-cut ball gown and mouth half open as she swooned. I huffed out an amused breath. I'd never known Eliza was a secret romance reader. I picked up the book and flipped through the pages, stopping when a flurry of paper spilled out. There was photographs, I realized, grainy as if they'd been taken with a phone and printed out on regular printer paper. The edges cropped unevenly with a pair of scissors. There were half a dozen of them, and they were all of me, taken the summer before Eliza died. What the hell? Me lounging on a towel beside the local pool, a shot from behind as I walked into the grocery store, and the rest, not just me anymore, but me and Roy. My hands went numb, the photos fluttering out of my fingers, the images barreling up at me from the attic floor. Kissing next to a fishing pond, standing over a pile of broken glass at the refinery, Roy and me in his truck, his arm hanging out of the window. The photo Faith had seen on Eliza's desk. I sucked in a quick breath, tiny dust motes dancing in front of my eyes, the watery light from the window casting shadows I kept trying to blink away. My heart was galloping crazy in my chest, and I couldn't get enough air. How had Eliza taken these? Had she been the prickle on the back of my neck that entire summer? Had this been what she wanted to talk to me about on the night she died? The questions were coming too fast for me to find any answers, each one only bringing more confusion. Why had she been following me? Had she known about Roy the whole time? Why hadn't she said something earlier? I didn't understand, and the only person I could ask to explain was long gone. Something was nipping at the edges of my brain, some detail I'd overlooked or ignored. I shuffled through the photos again, studying them closely, but the thought wouldn't materialize. I stuffed the contents of the box back inside and gathered the photos in my hand. I almost toppled down the ladder in my haste to escape the attic, catching myself at the last second with one arm and wrenching my shoulder in the process. The pain barely registered as I slammed the ladder up, shut the attic panel with a bang. I'd pay for the almost fall later, but for now, adrenaline was taking the edge off. I grabbed my phone from the top of my dresser and sent Dean a quick text, telling him I'd found something, that it involved Roy, and asking him to text me back. If anybody would know how Roy might have reacted to those photos, it was Dean. I stared at my phone, willing the tiny dots to appear, but they didn't. I called him, and when it went straight to voicemail, I knew he wasn't going to respond, that he meant it when he said we were done. I left a message anyway, hating the tiny shake in my voice, the desperate plea behind my words. I wish there was someone else I could ask, someone who might know what Eliza had been up to. But the only person she would have confided in was as long dead as she was. Was it possible Roy had killed her because he saw her following us? It didn't seem likely, even for someone as volatile as Roy. But what if Eliza had approached Roy, told him to stop seeing me? Would that have been enough for him to pick up a gun? Maybe the shadowy second person I'd always imagined being part of that night had been Eliza herself, unwittingly sealed her own fate when she pushed Roy too far. If that was the case, then her death was more my fault than I'd ever imagined, and I imagined a lot. But if Dean was to be believed, Roy's way would have been to confront Eliza, push right back if she pushed him. He didn't plan or lie in wait. The whole idea didn't feel right, which I was well aware was a stupid way to decide if something was true or not. But at this point, it was all I had. That nagging feeling in my gut and Eliza's voice in my ear telling me that finally I was getting closer. And that's the end of chapter 18. I'm trying to make sense of this chapter. So, I'm really trying to make sense of it. Wait, I'm getting there. Yeah, it take me this long to get to it. But anyway, so Sheriff Baker and Garrett got fired. I wonder what's that about. Why did Sheriff Baker get fired because of what Garrett did. And Dean now knows something that Greer was involved. And when she said she was getting ready to tell the whole truth, but she chickened out. What, Greer? What is it? And then to go into the attic to find out that Eliza was following her and Roy and knew the whole time. So if Eliza knew the whole time, her mother packed up her belongings, right? So her mother knew the whole time too, right? Does that matter that she knew? It was 14 years. I mean, I don't know. It's sounding now like this chapter is making it seem like Roy killed him if he did it, to keep Eliza quiet about him and Greer, and then that could be the connection up to the letter, I did it for you. That kind of makes sense a little bit, but I'm still not sure. So I'm gonna see y'all in the next chapter. Bye for now.